Okay, so first things first. Hi, my name is Jana. I'm a dark fantasy illustrator, mainly focusing on books now. And nervous. I haven't done this in a while. Anyways, so I'm going to talk today about the kind of clients you should or can expect to be working with as a book illustrator nowadays. And I'm gonna try this new format because bells. Okay, I'm incredibly busy this year, and I kind of say this every year, but this year it's really true. No, I just always feel that way. The thing is, I'm working on like 13 client projects right now, which is more than I've ever had going at the same time. And they're all cool and they all pay fairly, and I've made peace that this year is going to just be my year of freelance illustration, and I'm just going to be working for other people all year. I've waved goodbye to my personal work, but I don't want to give up on all the dreams, so I'm kind of trying to figure out how to keep this channel going anyways, and not have to spend that much time on scripting and editing and trying to kind of simplify things. And so usually I listen to audiobooks while I work, and I've thought maybe I can try talking to you guys instead. I can't actually show you what I'm working on because I'm sworn to secrecy, but I don't think you can actually tell a lot from this angle. And if you can, I'll have to blur it in post. And this video is probably gonna come out years from now. Anyways, book illustration. As I told you, I'm quite busy right now. This is career-wise, this is my best year ever, and it's really odd when friends and acquaintances come to me and one of the first things they ask is usually, so can you already feel the threat of AI? And for me, my career has been going really well throughout the last few years, and it's really good right now, and I'm finally working on the kind of stuff I wanted to work on since forever. And again, all the projects are cool and well paid, which is a first. And yeah, so things are going well for me, but I know that's not for all my peers, you know. Not all my peers are doing well right now, and I know there are folks who are changing careers and who have to find other options, and so it's always a bit of a weird situation to be in. To be like, oh yeah, I'm doing great, but that doesn't mean it's not a threat to the industry. And especially if you look at the German book covers, which have been shit for, well, forever really. But yeah, they've embraced AI wholeheartedly, which surprises nobody. A friend of mine said, well, one of the publishers she's working for, their covers have been so bad before that now that they're using AI, they're finally just average. It's just so sad. Never mind, that was not what I meant to talk about. This is the problem when I don't have a script. Expect the rambling, all the rambling. I will not be at my most coherent, especially once I've started, you know, actually working. That's when all the awkward silences come in. Never mind, we're trying this, right? This is just a first experiment, a first attempt. I've been actually considering doing this as a live stream, but then I chickened out. This gives me at least the feeling that I can edit stuff out in the end. Yeah. So what I actually want to talk about is what kind of clients I'm working with, because right now all my clients are book related, which is the dream. I've always said that, look, I'm a genre illustrator. I will illustrate anything that needs dark fantasy and dark fairy tale-esque horror stuff, and I'm happy to work on anything, but I've done that for a while and I've realized that what I like working on most are books, and where, you know, the biggest overlap of here you find money and here lie your interests is, for me, it's book illustration, and particularly book cover illustration. And yeah, this is finally where I am now, which is great. But that's not the only kind of job you can find right now. And actually, I think that right now is kind of a good time to be a book illustrator. It's a bit strange because the word has always been the word on the streets. The general vibe has been for years that books are dying, physical books are dying, and that's just really not the case. And right now books have become so expensive, it's crazy, and I am sure there are a lot less people who are buying books now. However, the people who are still buying books, I think, are happy to spend a little bit more, and they're starting to expect really beautiful books. And so throughout the last few years, there have been, apart from traditional book cover illustration work, there have been more and more of these illustrated special editions, fine presses. I think they're called fine presses. I always call them the limited editions. There's another one doing those limited editions. And that's really what it feels like, because you think you know them all, and then you get contacted by one, you're like, I've never heard of you, but you have you thought your books look beautiful and you have a good budget, I'm happy to work with you. And then you get contacted by another one, or you find another one, you're like, how many are there? How many are there now? They seem to just kind of pop up everywhere. And back in the days, it felt like there's Folio Society. There's the Folio Society. They're great, they're doing beautiful books. And maybe there's Cemetery Dance, who are doing special horror editions. But now there are just so many of these kind of limited edition presses, and those books are really, really expensive. But the market, there has to be a market for it, and there have to be people who are happy to pay that much money for books. And that's great for illustrators, because who delivers the pictures? And especially with limited editions and special editions, collectors want them to be high quality, and they want them to have an artist's touch, you know, and it feels cheap to use AI, right? It's like you can maybe sell one book with AI illustrations based on the novelty of saying, oh, this is all computer generated, the magic of it. But at some point, you know, that novelty wears off, and ultimately people want, if they're gonna pay like hundreds to thousands of dollars for a book, they want to have a person involved. So I think in that market, it's gonna be illustrators, you know, it's gonna be artists. And because there are starting to be more and more of these presses, these small publishing houses and small publishers, the market gets more and more saturated, and the competition is stronger between them. And that means they have to invest more and more in better art, and they have to add more art in it and more fancy stuff. And then you have, you know, with a slightly different audience, you have the book boxes, right, who are kind of doing the same thing, just at a slightly cheaper level. But they also need more and more art, and there are so many of these book boxes now, right? And they are also in competition with each other, and they need more art, and they're starting to invest more in art. And it's crazy, especially if you see that bleeding into the traditional publishing, right? Back in the days, you wouldn't really see all that much of these printed edges. but the book boxes have been doing that, and they're doing that whether it makes sense for the book or not. They all have printed edges. It's actually a bit of a pet peeve of mine, but never mind. Yeah, and this is just being done more and more with traditionally published special editions as well. And then you have the illustrated end papers, right? That's a typical thing for book boxes. They have illustrated end papers. And recently I've seen a fellow illustrator who worked on end papers for a major publisher, and it wasn't for a special edition, it was just the regular hardcover. And I thought, wow, it's crazy, they're doing fully illustrated end papers now too. And it's just because they're all in competition with each other, and if that means they all have to hire more and more illustrators to do more and more beautiful work, that's fine by me. I don't mind that. It's good. It's good for me, and it's good for you if you want to work in book illustration as well. So I think right now is a really good time for book illustration. Crazy as that sounds. Yeah, and they need all sorts of styles. They need all sorts of media. It's pretty great right now. It's kind of, I'm already like, oh my god, when does this end? This will probably end. It's just a trend. It's just a phase. But right now things are pretty good. And so yeah, this has been. Is this still the intro? Again, this is gonna be rambling. Am I actually gonna start working at some point, or I'm just gonna be like, I'm procrastinating right now. I'm just gonna talk to you now. Maybe that's what's gonna happen. I'm just gonna procrastinate. I'm just gonna talk to you now. I wanted to work, I really need to work, but maybe later with a nice audiobook. Now, what I actually wanted to talk about are just getting a little bit more into the different kinds of clients that I'm working with right now and that are out there. I've already talked about them a little bit now, like the book boxes, the fine presses, and of course traditional book cover illustration. So let's start with that. So traditional book cover illustration, it's kind of starting with self-publishers, right? Self-publishing authors, and then you have indie presses, indie publishers, and that's actually a huge field. You have indie presses that are essentially not much of a step up if we want to rank them, which I think is silly, but it's not, they're not much bigger is what I want to say than, you know, a single publisher, because technically you can have a self-publisher who just, you know, starts an LLC and is like a publisher now, and then they are a publisher now. There's not a lot between that. So you have kind of like a really small indie press that's like 2 people, but you can also have indie publishers that have the same budgets as the big ones, the big 5. They have an art department, they have accounting departments, and just because they call it indie doesn't mean they're small. And that's publishers like Sourcebooks, for example. Like, they have different imprints. They're huge actually, but they're not big 5, so they're indie. And then of course you have the big 5. Let's see if I can get them all together and make no mistakes. They're called the big 5 because they're like the big, huge publishing houses around there. They have tons of imprints and they control everything. So that's Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan. I'm at 3. Hachette, of course. Hachette, huge. Yeah, and so the last one, I think the last one is HarperCollins. Yeah. I always want to say Scholastic because in my mind they seem bigger, but it's not that important really. So those are the big ones that have like tons of imprints, international imprints, and Gotta say though, the international imprints have way less money than the US ones. So they're like the huge ones. They're kind of holy grail area if you want to get to work with them, because they have the money, right? So let's start talking about the pros and cons of working with self-publishers, because there are actually pros to that. I know some illustrators just flat out don't work with self-publishers, and I used to not understand that, but I kind of do now. I would never really just put up a blanket policy like that though, because it depends so much on the person, and there are really nice aspects about getting to work with a person who has actually written the book. You know, it's their baby and they care about it so much, and you get to create like the perfect cover for them, and they're so happy about it, and there's just more immediate feedback, and it's really lovely. It's just that you don't know who you're gonna work with necessarily. So what I would say, if you're having a bad feeling about working with a self-publisher, run. Don't doubt it, because it can get exhausting, and you don't know who you're working with essentially, because when big publishing houses, no, these are professionals. With the self-publisher, they're not. So, and there are pros and cons to that as well, right? Because the pros are they usually don't have their own contracts, so you can give them your own. You should probably have like a really artist-friendly contract template you can use for clients like that, or your terms of service, and they usually agree to that, so you actually get to work with like really nice favorable terms for you. Of course, on the budget side, it really depends on the person, and I would say that the people who are willing to pay a fair fee for a cover are probably not going to be a problem to work with either, because in illustration, and probably in a lot of industries, the people who are willing to actually invest in you and the product you're creating, the artwork you're creating, who trust you to do your work and do it well, they respect you more, you know? And it's kind of weird, because you think, oh, they have invested so much money in me, so they're going to be micromanaging or something, but that's not really the case. Usually the less they pay you, the worse they are. So yeah, and I guess what is a decent budget for self-publishing? I'd say don't work for anybody who pays less than $800 for a cover. And we're not even talking about, I don't know, licensing here. Just, I'm assuming a standard non-exclusive license here. Even if they want more, you know, but you should not be paid less than that. And that's low for a book cover. It's very low for a book cover, but it's high for a comic cover. So that's weird, but yeah, that's how industries are. They're weird. They make no sense. Right, so probably not less than that, but there are self-publishers out there who can compete with publishing houses. So they are willing to pay you several thousand. It's just, you never know who you're gonna work with. Another thing is, because they're not professionals, usually they might never have worked with artists before. It means you have to do more hand holding. You have to explain your creative process to them. Maybe you have to tell them how you work. You have to maybe ask more questions. So expect to invest more time on communication. Also, they might not have a clear vision for their project because they're not an art director. Oh, sweetheart. I'm talking to the invisible people again. I am so sorry. It's just disturbing to her. Yeah, so you might just have to consider it needs more time in the not art area of things. A really good thing is, because you're working with the person who also pays you, is they most likely are going to pay you pretty much immediately after you send an invoice. That's not something that's going to happen with big publishing houses, because they have their accounting department you have to get in their system. They're just going to pay you after 30 days, and then something might go wrong, and so on and so forth. So, but self-publishers are usually going to pay you immediately. So that's good if you need the money, right? If you need it now, then they're usually quick to pay you. I mean, the only person who has ever not paid me at all was also a self-publishing client. Again, you never know who you're dealing with to begin with. So yeah, with self-publishing clients nowadays, I would definitely ask for a deposit, or just have them pay you a deposit really early on in your process. I tend to work on sketches first and then take a deposit, and then, because I just feel weird taking money when I haven't done anything yet. Which is something I probably should, let go of. But it's just me. You should take a deposit like 50% up front. Be smart. So yeah, that's self-publishers. Then with indie presses, especially with small indie presses, they are probably very similar to working with self-publishers. The main difference is, in my experience, and that might be sound weird, they tend to have less of a budget. And I guess that's because they have more overhead, because they may be paying authors, and I don't know, they tend to have not as much of a budget, or they have less wriggle room there. And they sometimes have a contract, and that one might not be artist friendly. They might have a work for hire one, and that's either because they want a work for hire contract, or because they've just, I don't know, googled artist templates for hiring artists, and then they got a work for hire one and they're just using that, and they don't know any better. So I'm not going to go into that too much. Work for hire means everything you create during the time you work, so for that project you're working for this client, belongs to the client. And that doesn't mean they're allowed to use it. It means the artwork belongs to the client, like the copyright belongs to the client. Your traditional artwork, if you're working analog, is yours, but they own the copyright, and that can have some deep implications, and they just don't pay enough for that to be fair. And I think honestly that work for hire contracts becoming, I don't want to say the norm, but they're becoming more and more common in lots of illustration industries. That's probably worse. That has been probably worse for the ability of illustrators to make a living than AI currently is. So yeah, honestly, I think that has been making it harder, and it's just been creeping in for such a long time. So yeah, you might find that more with indie presses. Yeah, with bigger indie presses, again, there's the same thing. Look at the contracts, and also their budgets might not be quite that high, but yeah, they should be over $1,000 definitely somewhere, and they can go up. Depends on the market too, if you're working, I don't know, for children's books, middle grade or YA or adult. So it really depends. And depends on the size of the publisher and so on. With the big ones, pros and cons. So the pros are you're working with professionals, hooray! And they will send you beautiful briefs with mood boards, and they will hopefully know how to do art direction, and they know how to work with artists, and that's lovely and beautiful. The budgets are so much higher. And they're usually not trying to make you sign work for hire contracts. They're sometimes want a lot of usage rights, but they tend to be work for hire. They don't want your copyright because they know they don't need it. So that's nice. Again, the ones that pay you most also don't try to F you over. How nice is that? It doesn't mean that working for big publishers is always smooth sailing, because sometimes the process can get a little bit off course, because with a large publisher you may just be working with a designer or the art director, but they're talking to, I don't know, marketing, sales, the editor, and a lot of people, and you can kind of get the too many cooks in the kitchen thing. Or maybe sales wasn't at that one meeting, and then they see the final cover and they go, what happened there? So yeah, sometimes things can go off course a little bit, but the thing is, they tend to pay you enough that it's okay. It's annoying, but it's okay. So yeah, how much do they pay? Again, depends on the publisher, depends on the project, but let's say $3,000 for a front cover is like a good average. You can get more than that, you can get less than that. Usually then it's like a full wrap around, and then it's just 3,500 or something. But yeah, that's a good number, I think, to just kind of keep in mind. So that's cool. Again, you can get more, can be a bit less. You want to check what licenses you're granting. Yeah, but they're cool. That's cool. Oh yeah, about the payment, I did talk about that before. It can take a long time for you to get paid. Again, a book cover might take a few months until you're actually done, and then you can send in your invoice, and yeah, then they take 30 days to pay you. And if something goes wrong sometimes somewhere along the way, and because so many people are involved now, like, things start to go wrong as soon as there's an accounting department, and somebody just has to have a problem with the invoice, then just put it aside, forget about it, or they just don't see it and they forget about it. You know, there's humans involved, humans make mistakes, and even if they automate a whole lot, it is not necessarily better, because then you have trouble finding a human to contact if something goes wrong. So that's a bit of a pain. Also, you tend to have to jump through a few hoops before you're actually in their system, right? And once you are and you have your vendor numbers and all this stuff, then everything is quite peachy usually. But until then, you have to send in a bunch of paperwork. But it's fine, you do that once, right? But yeah, it can take a while for you to actually see any money. And if you need money now, that's not great. I mean, I guess you can try to negotiate for a deposit, but I've never tried that. Just trust that they will pay me eventually, and the way I've set up my business, I don't need the money now, so it's usually fine. Hello, you've been bored. Trouble getting on the desk? Yeah, hi. Hi, sweetheart. Yeah. See, you're not even disturbing me. I'm not really working. Cutie. Well, turns out my camera just records 30 minutes of footage, which is fine. It kind of means I've been talking a lot without anything getting filmed, but it's okay. it also tells me that this is getting really, really long, especially if I'm not planning on actually editing anything. It's getting so long. Imagine this is the most rambly and incoherent podcast ever now. Yes, I know, sweetheart, and my cat is getting really hungry. So let's get through this. Let's get through this a little bit faster. Okay. I was talking about getting paid by publishers. We're done with that. It's over. We have our money. Next thing I want to talk about are fine presses, right? The limited editions that I already mentioned are popping up everywhere. So pros, you get so much creative freedom. You get to really sink into a book. You get to really dig into the material. You can kind of have your own vision for it. You're allowed to choose the scenes you want to illustrate. Usually you get to have, just have so much artistic freedom. You have so much room to make the project your own. There usually isn't a whole lot of art direction. There usually aren't a lot of people who have to okay your work. It's very often it's just the author and maybe the person you're working with. So yeah, you have loads of creative freedom. You also get, well, sometimes you get a deposit, sometimes not. I guess you can negotiate one if you want. You don't get paid as much as for a book cover, right? Book covers, big 5 book covers are again the holy grail, which is why the competition for them is quite hard. There are a lot of illustrators who'd like to do book covers, so it's nice that we have the small presses, the fine presses, and book boxes later on, so on. That there are alternatives to the book covers. Again, rambling. So yeah, the pay is usually fine, but don't expect like huge heaps of money. But you do get a good chunk because it's a good chunk of work, and if you want to have a little bit more of security in a year, I mean, you kind of know you can expect this amount of money if you work on this project. So that's generally nice. They tend to pay quite quickly. Again, quite often the person you work with is also the person who pays you, because they tend to be very small publishers. Yeah, so that's very cool. You get, yeah, that's really quite cool. There tend to be a lot of these publishers, and they just tend to increase. There are more and more and more of them. And they're starting to want to have more art, and then have bigger budgets because more art. And so yeah, this is quite cool. Oh yeah, and you have a secondary market, because these are collector's items you're creating, right? And depending on how much of a fandom, how much of a collector base you have for the book you've worked on, you might get people who want to buy prints. And that's the thing, you tend to keep a lot of the usage rights for the artwork you do for these novels. Of these projects, that's kind of why the pay isn't that high. You get to keep a lot of the usage rights, and then you can maybe have licensing deals with other publishers, for example. Or you can sell the prints, you can maybe make your own products, But there's a whole market for remarks, right? That's sketches that you draw into the limited editions, and you can get a few $100 for those, depending on how elaborate they are. So yeah, that's cool. You can sell originals to collectors. Yes, kitten, I'm trying to keep it short, I know. But you're not getting fed yet. No, you still have to wait. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Yeah, so that's for the fine presses. for the book boxes, they have a slightly different audience than the fine presses. So fine presses, I think the audience are more older people, more money, probably slightly more male, especially if we go into the horror and collector spaces. Whereas the book boxes have a younger, I think largely female audience, so they're publishing more YA, they're publishing more romantasy and more current novels as they're coming out. And a big difference is that you have way less creative freedom. Way less. I think that's probably the only con I have for working with them. To be fair, it makes the process quite smooth because they tell you exactly what they want, and they're like, we want this scene, and yes, don't hurt me, sweet, don't climb up my leg, thank you. And so yeah, they tell you what they want, and then you work on it, and it can be a lot of work. For some reason I always end up with like end papers that have at least 4 or 5 characters on them. At least. Sometimes I see people who illustrate end papers that have like 1 character and an animal companion or something. I'm like, they seem to exist. Why do I always get the ones with the crowds? Never mind. So that's the only negative. Otherwise, yeah, you don't usually have like a full book that you're illustrating because they tend to hire multiple illustrators for their editions. End papers are very common. You have sometimes the book, the edges, the printed edges, sometimes interior illustrations. Yeah, and the pay really depends on the company. Some book boxes pay very well, and some not. And I mean, the bigger established ones tend to just pay better than the others. So yeah, but I guess you can just, ouch, ask their budget, sweetheart, please don't. Yeah, that they tend to pay fairly quickly. That's a plus. They tend to pay fairly quickly. So I find they're good jobs. You're kind of, you get this very clear art direction, then you work on it, and because they're not covers, because covers get a lot of scrutiny because they're the face of the book, but end papers aren't, so there isn't as much pressure, I feel, on delivering the very best work ever. So yeah, they're good to just kind of fill the gaps in your schedule. They're just done pretty quickly, and then you get paid, and then it's over. So yeah, it's cool, and there are just more and more of these kind of jobs around, and they pay better, I think, because the competition is starting to get stronger. They're starting to make more money. There's more money in this market. So yeah, anything important that I've missed about them? You say no, right? You say I'm done? Yeah, you say I'm done. You hear it. I'm done. That's it. I guess this video is long enough as it is anyways. It's a bit sad. You were really cute when I did the other footage. You were so cute. Yeah. You want to do that again? Be cute in front of the camera. Yeah? No? She says no. I mean, she says nothing, which I interpret as no. Yeah, I will have to do cat work now, and then I'm actually going to get started on this. It did say something about, crowd scenes on end papers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 people. 7 invisible people, goodbye. Thank you for listening. Those of you who have made it here to the end. If you're interested in more illustration, job content stuff, I made a video on how to find clients. If I find out how you link that, I'm gonna link that. Otherwise, if you have any questions, if there are any topics you'd like me to cover in the future, the comment section exists, just let me know. I don't know. Yeah, and stop. Yeah. Bye, guys. I have things to do. Yeah. Like, play with you. You want to play? No, you want to feed. You want to eat. I know you want to eat, but we're going to play instead. Yeah, you still have hours to go.
Hi. You want to come here? Hi. Hi, my sweet. You want to help?
Yeah, you're going to help. I thought you'd be asleep right now. Aww, aren't you cute? I still need that paper. Oh dear. See? Yeah, that's fine. You're cute. You're cute. You're so cute. The cutest you are.